I spend a ridiculous amount of time feeling like I've done something wrong and I'm about to get in trouble. With whom, I have no idea. But whatever it is, it's definitely my fault. Sure, I've made mistakes, I've said terrible things, I've lashed out in pain, and I remember most of them vividly. But I'm sure we've all done terrible things at some point. So why do we struggle so much to forgive ourselves? Why do we find it so hard to lay down the burden of our mistakes, or to feel like we're not constantly having to make up for something we've done wrong? I'm going to share with you some of the reasons that I think we find it so hard to forgive ourselves, so you can finally start to understand what might be going on for you and maybe do something about it. I'm Nicola, and I've struggled to forgive myself, but I'm working to find ways to let go of that so I can focus my energy instead on creating positive things, doing good in the world instead of being trapped by the past and a burden of guilt. When we come from a background that has childhood trauma or complex PTSD, we tend to learn or take on the idea that things are our responsibility. We tried to connect with the people, the adults around us. We did things and they didn't work and we kept trying. But we took on this idea that if we could just do things differently somehow, it would make the difference and things would change and things would be okay. And so we have this sense of responsibility, an overblown sense of responsibility, because we learned that things were our fault. Even if they weren't, that was the lesson we took from it. And this can lead us to perfectionism, trying to make sure that everything is just so, because then maybe, just maybe, things will be okay and we can forgive ourselves for all the things we've ever done wrong. And this leads to constantly feeling guilty. Like I've experienced this constant feeling of guilt that just follows you around, feeling like you're responsible for everything and anything. But we need to learn to recognize and understand that feeling guilty does not necessarily mean that we are guilty. Guilt is something that we feel when we break a rule, but the rules in our head are not always good rules, and sometimes these rules need to be broken. So sometimes when we feel guilt, it's because we did the right thing. We spoke up, we set a boundary, we did what was right for us. And so we need to see how this sense of responsibility and this feeling of guilt are getting in the way of our ability to forgive ourselves. It also leads us to trying to control things, to the point where we're trying to change things that we simply don't have the ability to control. But we feel like if we can control everything down to the smallest detail, then maybe things will actually feel better or turn out better. And it may look like resisting what happened or what currently is, looking at a situation saying, I don't like the idea of that, so I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. I'm going to resist the idea of that. Or maybe it's simply just holding on too tight. We're trying to control everything. We feel like we've got everything together, but in reality, it's holding on by a thread. And if we forgive ourselves, if we let go of that control, then we fear that everything's just going to fall apart. Everything's going to go to hell because we just don't have the ability to hold it together anymore. We hold ourselves to such higher standards. We expect so much more of ourselves. We expect that we can control things that we actually can't control, because that sense of control helps us to feel like things might be okay. Or maybe we're just afraid that if we let go of that control and forgive ourselves, that we'll actually be condoning what we did or the view we have of ourselves. We'll be saying it's okay that we're flawed, or that we fall short, or that we're broken, and accepting that less than desirable experience. Or maybe we're just afraid that we're going to lose a part of ourselves, that if we forgive ourselves and let go of that control, that we'll be losing a piece of our self-image. We won't know who we are anymore. So this need for control, to control our experience, control the details, is something that really gets in the way of our ability to forgive ourselves. This can also lead to a strong sense of shame. We have a very vocal inner critic, that voice, that negative voice that jumps in at every opportunity to tell us what's wrong with us, what we did wrong, what we could be doing better. And this sense of shame can pervade our experience, and it can lead us to see our failures as bigger than they actually are. It can lead us to exaggerate our failures out of proportion to how the rest of the world sees them. And even within the context of our own experience, we see our failures as bigger than they really are, and as more impactful than they really are, and As a result of this shame, we feel the need to punish ourselves. We feel like if we punish ourselves, then we're less likely to fall short next time. We're less likely to make those mistakes in the future. Or maybe the punishment is to atone for our shortcomings, for the terrible things that we think we've done or that we have done. But by punishing ourselves, we're somehow making amends for all those terrible things that are part of the makeup of who we are. And to feel like that if we don't punish ourselves, if we don't push ourselves, we don't remind ourselves how we fall short constantly, that we won't get any better, that it's necessary to punish ourselves constantly in order to grow and become a better person. And that shame and that inner voice, that critic, can also tell us these negative things about ourselves to try and protect us from failure. So as a mechanism to say, well, if I am constantly talking myself down and reminding myself what I did wrong previously, then maybe I'll be less likely to make those mistakes in future. And so we're protecting ourselves with this shame. We're using this shame as a protection mechanism. And so this shame that we carry about our shortcomings, about our failures, can make it really hard to forgive ourselves. And then there's the fear that can drive us. Fear tells us that there's always one more thing to fix. Maybe we say, yes, okay, I will forgive myself, but only after I've fixed this thing, or I've made amends for this thing, or I've fixed this relationship, or I've learned this skill, or I've done more of this particular task. We give ourselves this one more thing that we have to do before we're allowed to forgive ourselves. But the trouble with taking that approach and listening to that voice of fear is that the goalposts are always moving. We can never do enough. We can never fix everything. We can't fix the past, and we certainly can't be perfect. We can't do enough. There will never be enough things that we can do before we will reach the point where we're allowed to forgive ourselves. So it's a constant chase towards this one more thing. We might also fear how it feels to forgive ourselves. It's an uncomfortable place to be if we haven't spent any time there, because it requires a very different experience from what we're used to. We're very comfortable and familiar with self-recrimination and judgment and criticism. And so when we try to move into self-forgiveness, it feels very uncomfortable. And so maybe the fear of that can stop us. So these fears can really get in the way of us being able to forgive ourselves. To understand how we can begin to forgive ourselves, we need to understand what forgiveness is. And the best way to do that is to look at it in terms of other people. What does forgiveness look like when we forgive other people? What does it mean to forgive someone else? At its heart, forgiveness is about letting go. And I've got a whole video about letting go that you might want to watch after this one to dive into it in more detail. But we let go. We let go of any resentment or anger towards someone else. If someone has done something to us that affected us negatively in some way, we're letting go of any anger or resentment that we have around that. And if we turn that forgiveness towards ourselves, that means letting go of any resentment or anger towards ourselves. And when we forgive others, we're also letting go of our attachment to the idea that they have wronged us. They may have wronged us. That's not the point. The point is we're letting go of how tightly we're holding on to this idea that they did wrong us. And when we turn that forgiveness towards ourselves, we have to let go of our attachment to the idea that we are wrong, that we have somehow fallen short, or that we have somehow done something wrong. We have to let go of that in order to forgive ourselves. And a technique that I found really helpful for working through this letting go process is EFT or meridian tapping. Because in that, you go through statements that say things like, even though I have this issue, even though I have this problem, even though I have this shortcoming, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And that can be really hard for some people to say, but it helps us to understand that we are letting go of this idea that we are wrong. We're willing to accept ourselves as we are. So how do we forgive ourselves? Well, it starts with self-compassion. When we forgive others, we give them compassion. We open our hearts to them, and we need to do the same thing to ourselves. We need to treat ourselves like we would a loved one or a best friend and really give ourselves that compassion. We need to decide that we will no longer be our own worst enemy, that we will no longer be at war with ourselves. We also need to face up honestly to the thoughts and the feelings and the views that we have of ourselves. We need to really get clear on how we are seeing ourselves as falling short, such that we don't deserve forgiveness, because we need to know what they are in order to start changing those perspectives. And then we need to find a way to stop the negative self-talk. We need to find a way so that we are not absorbed, consumed by this negative view that we have, this filter that we have, this perspective we have of ourselves that is full of negativity. And I've got a video that takes you through how to stop negative thoughts in their tracks that you might want to watch after this one. And we need to stop replaying the past, all the terrible things that we did or didn't do, but the things we think that we fall short on, the mistakes we've made, the reasons that we don't deserve forgiveness. Stop ruminating on those and making those things bigger and more negative than they have to be. We need to reframe those events. We need to look at them no matter what they were, good or bad, and try to find better ways to look at them. No matter what happened, no matter how terrible it was, we need to find a way to look at it that is more constructive and more positive and takes us out of that place of such deep, intense, all-consuming negative self-talk. And we need to separate who we are at our core from what we have done, so that not seeing that our actions define us. Yes, we may have done terrible things in the past, or we may not have done terrible things in the past, but that those things don't define who we are at our essence, and that we can choose from this moment forward to do things differently. We can make different choices, better choices. We can learn and change and improve. And that is who we are from this point forward, how we express ourselves in the world. But who we are at our core is a constant, and it's not defined by our past. And that leads us to self-acceptance, to actually accepting who we are, to looking at all the pieces of us, the good and the bad, the not so nice and the great parts, to look at all of those parts and accept every piece of it, even the parts we don't want to take responsibility for our experience and our part in that experience, yes, but to look at every piece of us and accept every single piece of who we are without question, without exception. And then to let go of any sense that we need to make amends just for being ourselves. That somehow by being ourselves, that means we are failing, we are falling short, we are not enough, we are inadequate. To let go of the idea that we have to make up for that, that we somehow are less than, and therefore we need to address that. We need to make up for wherever we fall short, to let go of that entirely, and to let go of shame and self-hate, to let go of all of these beliefs about how bad we are, how flawed or broken we are, to let go of the need to hate ourselves as some kind of mechanism to improve ourselves, to actually let go of self-hate and choose to see ourselves more positively. And I've got a guide with a bunch of self-care activities that might help with that, to really embrace who you are and take care of yourself in the moment. And to accept the idea that being human means being flawed, that this human experience involves making mistakes, it involves imperfections, it involves idiosyncrasies, it involves failings, whatever that is. It involves things that we might not want in their form, but that is what it means to be human. Being human means having experiences, making mistakes, falling down, getting up, and we need to fully embrace that as this human experience. And to also see that all of these experiences, good or bad, are opportunities to learn and grow rather than terrible things. They're opportunities. And to turn the energy that we're putting into fear and shame and taking responsibility and trying to control things, put all that energy into creating positive outcomes into the world, to creating things, to making the world better for ourselves and for other people, and to celebrate our progress, to look at how far we've already come, how far the progress we're making right now and the progress we will make in the future, to celebrate all of that, to recognize that we are actually making changes, we are making a difference, and to all of these steps will open the door to the possibility of giving ourselves that self-forgiveness that we so desperately want. But now you can see why it can be so hard to forgive ourselves, why we really struggle to feel like it's okay to give ourselves that grace, and why it can feel safer to hold on to self-judgment and self-recrimination and all that self-hatred. But now you also have some strategies to counter that, to start to forgive yourself so you can let go and move on with your life. And if you want to understand some of the other lies that fear tells you and how you can break free from those, watch this video next. Got questions? Comment below, and I'll see you in the next one.